asking people why questions, one of the things I've observed is why invites a defensive response. And I don't even mean like I'm going to be defensive, but why invites me to make the case. And one of the things I've found especially valuable in my business relationships is if I'm asking myself why, the version of the questions I'll often ask is, what had you say that? What has that be a priority for you? And when I reframe why in a series of what and how follow-up questions, I often get closer to the person's true why if something matters.
All right, so here's the thing that drives me nuts. And I'll tell you what, Andrea, I don't know if it drives me nuts about me or if it drives me nuts about other people. And I'm now old enough that I'm actually considering these things. So one of two things is probably true, and you'll tell me if there's a middle ground in here. One of them is I am such an egomaniac. I hate listening to people talk. I just want to talk. Or many people that I talk to can't give a straight answer, can't just like follow the plot. I'm trying to lead them in a structured conversation. Kind of a phrase I use a lot. I ask them what time it is, and they start telling me how clocks were built. It's like, no, just tell me the time. And I don't know if that's my own impatience and maybe people just need to get this out of them so I can understand the context of their answer, or if it's just that people like hearing themselves talk as much as I like hearing myself talk. What do you think?
I mean, I'm a super learning nerd. So part of me wants to go to communication styles and assessments and showcasing expertise. But at the heart of it, if somebody asks a question, please just answer it.
Right. Yeah. And what do you have a take, Andrea, on why that's something that even needs to be talked about? Is this a new thing? Is it a forever thing? Like what is it that makes, and the reason you and I are talking is we've had this similar conversation and I was blown away by your answer, but I guess like, how did we get here that we have to talk about this?
I'm not exactly sure how we got to this place, but one of the things I know was as a kid, you want to raise your hand and you want to like give this long expository answer. And I grew up in a school where it was like, show your work, right? So it wasn't enough and this is something that I talk about in my family. It wasn't just enough to get the right answer on the math problem. You had to show your work. And so I feel like there's almost like an educational component to it of like everybody's constantly showing their work. And sometimes I really just want to know 4, or as our friends in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy said, 42 is the answer to the universe.
That's
and then just leave it.
Yes.
We'll be right back with more. But first, here's a quick message from Bering McKinley.
Most MSPs are constantly busy, chasing tickets, projects, and fires. But without structure, it's hard to know if the business is really improving. Vision from Bering McKinley is the system that helps you work on your business, not just in it. It connects leadership strategy with daily execution. Vision aligns people, process, and performance, creating clarity and rhythm from goals to results. And the Vision app brings that structure to life, helping you create policies, track goals, review KPIs, and collaborate with your BMK consultant all in one place. Behind it all, Jetson AI, your assistant inside Vision, helps you find answers, generate insights, and take action faster. With Vision, you gain visibility, accountability, and measurable growth. You're not guessing, you're improving. Vision, Jetson, and the Vision app, your path from strategy to results. Start transforming your business today.
All right, let's get back to the conversation.
You know what? As I sometimes get critical of other people, that show your work component to answers we like to give, I think, and I promise I won't turn this into a therapy session. I feel like when I'm talking to a client, I feel very confident in my information, what I know, what I can share. But maybe part of my long expository answers are me like proving it as I go. You ask me what a good rate is, and I have to tell you a million things, not just 150. That's really, I love that. I love that.
You know, early in my career, I encountered a methodology for presentations called the pyramid principle. And it was written by a woman called Barbara Minto. And I will never forget when I got trained in it. She said people funnel information down and then do the analysis to come up with a conclusion. But our clients are hiring us or asking us to pitch them business by telling us the conclusion. And then they'll ask us if they disagree or they're curious for more information. So that's why she called it the pyramid principle. She said, stop talking through your brain, like how you process the information, and flip it over, right? So the funnel becomes a pyramid if you present from that. And that really started to help me notice how I was communicating and how other people were communicating. And that had me come up with a really simple self-coaching around answer the question as it was asked.
Absolutely. And we're gonna talk about the AEIOU, but we're gonna make people earn it a little bit and listen to
All
us chat a
right.
little bit more because I am so excited. And you when you said it, I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. And then 3 days later, I couldn't remember what they all stood for. So we're gonna go there in a minute. So let's talk more about me for a second. So
Awesome.
the you've kind of blown my mind with that, trying to, overthink an answer to somebody. So if somebody asks me a really direct question like, Josh, what's a good rate for a per user price to charge for my managed services? And this happened, earlier today. I said, you know what? I'm going to answer that. I'm going to give you a very direct answer, but I feel like I have to contextualize it a lot. Do you mind if I do that? And I could tell, I just knew the guy was like, just tell me the price or tell me your answer. But my body wouldn't let me. Tell me about that phenomena of like, I'm even, metacognating on it a bit, but I still won't
Yeah.
do what I should do.
Well, I think a lot of us are asking the question of like, am I going to get it right? Are they going to agree with me? If I just give you the answer, are we going to start debating it? Right. And so, especially if I'm getting hired for my expertise or getting consulted for my expertise, I want to show you the system, the methodology, the cognitive framework, the paradigm that I use to get there, as opposed to, I joke about the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but like part of what lands for so many people about this machine thinks for ages and just spits out a number as the answer to, right? But what is the meaning of life? And it's so dissatisfying. And I keep coming back to that as a communicator to be like, sometimes really all they want is 42.
I know I'm gonna try that because I just, even knowing we're gonna have this conversation today and even the other conversations we've had, as I was doing that to this poor guy today, I was like, why can't you get over it? Why do you have to show your work? So I'm going to make a very conscientious attempt to just say, because, and I'll tell you, I think part of what goes through my head on that is my wife and I talk about it a lot of, we'll hang out with certain couples or certain people. And, we're both kind of like, we ask a lot of questions of people. We kind of, I think I definitely over index on, um, I want to make sure you come away from this conversation feeling really good. And I want to do that by letting you talk about yourself, by me asking questions that I'm curious about with you. I think sometimes people can feel like they just sat through an interview or an interrogation. But I think I overwhelm people. So my wife and I both kind of observes like, these people never ask us a question. They never
Mm.
get curious back. And I can kind of take it and say, that's probably because I overwhelm them. I'm just too busy rapid firing my curious questions. But long way of getting here. I don't know that I always trust people to say, if I just give you the answer, can I trust that you'll continue the dialogue with, the right questions? And so I don't know what to do with that.
Gosh, one of my favorite questions to ask people in a conversation is there a question you wish that I asked you? So like when I'm working with a client, especially in the early stages of getting to know them, I try to anticipate what are the questions that they want me to answer. Do we have the understanding of their needs, yada, 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 all those things. But then what are the questions you want me to ask? What questions did I miss? Right. And how do I be in that so people know that I'm curious about them? But what you said about rapid firing, I love to ask people questions. And it's such a fine line between curious inquiry and interview, investigate, and then interrogate, right? It's a continuum.
Yes.
It's a continuum
Yes. Yes.
for sure.
Yeah, I know I try to be more conscientious. Like last night, we went to this really cool party, locally. It was, a friend of ours was hosting this party and there was going to be a celebrity there, this UFC fighter that we just think is really cool and awesome. And I had to like force myself not to ask this because we had full access to him. We were just like, we could have spent and talked to an hour and that's no problem. I had to fight every instinct to just like ask one question and just let them go with it because I had 50 more queued up and it would have looked like an interrogation. So
Right.
it's a tough. I have to consciously fight myself on doing that. Andrea, when you think about just the overall state of employer and kind of sales, are you kind of sales minded? Do you participate in sales
Absolutely.
coaching? Okay.
I do.
Um, I want your take on this. It's, I read this book by Stephen Schiffman many years ago, and he said, the book is called Ask Questions, Get Sales. And his concept was, very opposite of Sandler, which is very much, get that client to tell you their pain, like directly. What happens if those type of situational questions? But in Schiffman, it's very much who are you? What do you
Well,
do? How do you do it? Why do you do it that way? And then ultimately, how can I help you do what you do better? And he has to make the point. Those are not the questions you ask. Those are the categories of conversations and questions you ask. So in that first one of like in a sales environment, when you think of the salespeople that you've observed or coached in that thing called what do they call that first thing? What do they call it when you're trying to establish a rapport
oh
building?
yeah. Yep.
The Schiffman method is very much like, let me find out who you are. Let me give you the opportunity to tell me about you. How do you feel like the state of rapport building is with salespeople that you have observed today? Because I have a take on it, but I'm way more interested in your take in that rapport building phase.
You know, I noticed there's like distinct styles. I've noticed some of the people that I work with are really very relational, I think is the way you describe them, of like, oh, I'm going to yuck it up with the person and try to find something on a more personal level that we can connect over, where other people are really diagnostic minded of, can I really ask investigatory questions to understand? And those are both really valid ways to approach getting to know somebody. I find the salespeople who are most successful find a combination of recognizing that I'm an individual human being, and then I'm in a work context and I have particular challenges. And so they don't restrict themselves to one mode. Um, and it's interesting because I've seen people who are both super relational and like want to know you as a person be accused of being salesy. And I've seen people who are super diagnostic also be accused of being salesy. So I think part of it is not just the questions you ask, but also how you're being with people as you ask them.
Yes, yes, yes. And I think, I follow a principle just because I don't know anything better, but this is kind of order of selling. Sell yourself first, company second, goods and services last. And if that's even directionally accurate, what I find with the type of clients we work with, they're very technical minded. They have great, they're just awesome people, but they're really comfortable going right into, you told me you have a problem with this. Let's just talk about that. Hey, my name's Bob. My name's Joe. Good to meet you. So tell me about this Exchange server. And they skip that point, that part of like, establishing, selling yourself, which I always think of sell yourself by showing your curiosity in them. They'll learn everything they need to know. But that it seems very difficult for me to take my worst offenders, so to speak, and saying, slow down. Let's get to know the person a little bit. Let's work on that. that feels like a really big mountain to climb for folks. Have you ever heard anything like this, or have you observed people struggle with that piece of selling themselves?
And it makes me think of that phrase like the sniff test, right? And I happen
Okay.
to be a dog mom.
Nice.
And so when the dogs greet each other, the first thing they do is sniff. And so, like, at some level, I got to remind myself, like, I'm still an animal. Like, I've got an amygdala, right? I've got this reptilian part of the brain. And so, in the selling self, because I've heard people be like, but I'm not selling me, I'm selling the service, I'm selling the expertise, I'm selling my organization. And been like, but you're the interface. You're still the interface. And you got to pass the sniff test. You got to get people to trust you. And whether you're talking about sales, am I really going to tell you the true problem that I'm having if I don't trust you? Like, and I think about team building and like the work of Pat Lencioni. The foundation of good teamwork is trust, right? And I keep coming back to there's that like very kind of animal, like, do you pass my sniff test? Whatever that looks like for me. And each of us has a very different sniff test.
Yes, 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 yes. And that efforts to take somebody who kind of doesn't want to learn how to be a better salesperson or whatever, they just think it's an impossible task, or that maybe owner who just thinks sales is a bad word and they would never want to be accused of being a salesperson or salesy. Yeah, right. Yeah, it's really tough to find a path to bring that person to saying you interfacing just like a human and how you would meet a stranger on the
Yeah.
street or somebody at a party. That's okay. That doesn't make you salesy. I think we can get these blinders on that say if I talk about anything other than their problem, I'm being a salesy, kind of
Yeah.
cheese ball. Oh, I don't know. I struggle with getting those folks, to a better place that I think they'll do better at. Have you ever faced any of those kind of challenges of
Well, I think I was that person. Sorry to just jump in with such excitement. I think
yeah,
I was
yeah.
that person because for years I was like, I'm not a salesperson. And I kind of like was like, sales is a bad word. And about 7 or 8 years ago, I had someone say to me, what do you mean you're not a salesperson? Like, I was actually partnered with a salesperson in the business development function. And she was like, you're helping me close all this business. Of course, you're a salesperson. And it was an aha moment. And I said, what is selling to you? And she said, it's really building rapport and engaging another person or organization or team so that they'll trust you with their problems so you can help solve them. And I was like, that really blew my mind. And it was interesting because this woman had been my salesperson. And then I ended up working with her as a colleague when I was at Harvard Business Publishing. She had been my relationship manager, which was, fancy Harvard Business Publishing language for salesperson,
Yes,
and really taught me
yes,
to reframe what I understood sales to be. And that was
yes.
super helpful. Thank you, Amy
That's
Hamlin.
Thank you. Shout out to Amy. That's awesome. It's funny you mentioned Harvard Publishing. One of my son's classmates, his mother work is something at Harvard Business Publishing. We'll have to share names
Oh, wow.
offline. See
All
if yeah.
right.
Yeah, that's funny. Okay, what a small world. Okay, cool. Okay, so that brings me to we've got two more pieces. I want to take us full circle to okay, I'm in there. I've got I'm with my prospect. I'm going straight for the technical jugular. And if somebody was recording us, they might see me going on for long monologues. They might see me trying to educate them on everything under the sun, when maybe that client just said, so what would it look like to, change our servers? What would that actually feel like, or what would that look like for us? Would we have downtime? Let's get to that AEIOU because I think that's really going to be relevant. Can you
Sure
share
thing.
do you mind sharing that
Oh, I'm
AEIOU?
I'm so happy to because
Yes.
years ago I got the coaching that said, "Hey, Andrea, get to the point, cut to the chase." Right? It was the how do I implement a pyramid principle in my day-to-day communication? And so A is for answer. Answer the question as it was asked. If it's a yes no question, don't make it open-ended. Give me a yes or no. Then explain. If the person starts, you can tell from their reaction, right? Because I want to now create some context for my answer. So it's yes, and here's why, right? But really pay attention because you want to inquire, did I give you the information that you needed? Because sometimes the questions people ask are not actually the questions that they're trying to answer in their own heads. And
Right.
so A is answer, E is explain, only really if asked, and inquire, did you get what you need from me? And then onboard whatever their response is and when you inquire. So, Josh, you asked me about this. I answered, is that enough information? Do you want some more detail? Would it be helpful? And then update, right? Update your answer, start again based on what they said. And so I find for myself, that's helped me just, here's your answer. Can I explain? And sometimes I do ask for permission. So like you were talking about earlier, the desire to contextualize. Here's the good
Yes.
rate. Here's why. Is it okay if I give you some details to why I said that?
Nice. Nice. And was there an O?
Yeah. So answer, explain, inquire, onboard, like take it
Onboard,
on,
onboard,
take it
onboard,
on,
onboard.
right? Actually take it
Yes.
on. And then update, right? Update your response,
Okay.
update how you're interacting with the person. How often do we just answer and then go back into our own inner dialogue?
That's
I'm
right.
guilty. I'm
That's
guilty
right.
of that. So I'm not pointing fingers at, but I'm
No way.
pointing it back at myself.
Okay, so I remember when you first shared this, I asked you, is this an Andrea original? Is this in a book somewhere? And I think you came across this on your own. You came up with this.
Yeah. And you know what?
Yeah.
Because I was the like, show your work. I had come out of academia into the work world. And so I was used to, you're the teaching assistant, you're up here to explain things. And as I found myself in investment banking at the beginning of my career, having just literally come straight out of I'm a PhD dropout, I found myself with people who are like, I work from bell to bell and I measure my success in basis points.
Right, right.
They wanted answers. And then if they needed more information, they'd ask me for an explanation. And
Yes.
it was a real paradigm shift.
Yes. Yes, yes. How how many times in your life have you wished that you could just kind of pin that to your shirt in a conversation and say, "Hey, follow this. When I ask questions, follow this." Like that's when you've got so much clarity in your own, it sometimes frustrating to, have people just not do that because they just don't think about it.
It can be. And one of the tools that I've introduced with my clients and my own team is the value of the timeout. Because interruption, there's a school of thought that goes interrupting is inherently bad. I don't actually think that it is. Right? I think there are different kinds of interruptions. Sometimes I'm excited and I step on the end of what you're saying, not because I'm trying to shut you down, but because I'm like, it's an excited utterance. And other times I really need to just pause you because I don't understand what you're saying because I've already gotten the information I need and I want to move on. Right. So I definitely like to say with my team members, hey, listen, if you're not getting what you need in the communication, and with my clients, can we use the timeout? And I like the hand gesture too, because some people get into the talking, especially when we're virtual with each other. And so it's harder to pick up on like the vibes. That was so West Coast of me to say,
Yes. Yes,
but
yes, yes.
it's true.
Well, that's great. I do this thing and I talk at least 30 hours of conversations with clients every week. So I sometimes will find something, a way I said something, I'll like, oh, I'm going to use that again. And I use it. And then a week later, I'm like, that was so cheesy. The thing I was doing for a period of time was, if I'm about to start explaining something, I'll be like, now listen, you have a remote control in your hand. You get to pause me. You can hit
Yeah.
stop altogether. You can rewind. But most importantly, you can hit that fast forward button. And
Mhm.
it's in a way, I think there's something kind of, funny about that. But in a way, I'm kind of, putting the responsibility on them instead of putting the responsibility on myself. Where it's like, I could just follow the AEIOU. Instead, I'm putting you in the tough seat of saying, interrupt me. I dare you. Go ahead and press that button if you like. It's not really all that fair to put somebody in that position, I don't think.
Well, I think it's like, what have we negotiated? Right. One of my favorite words is permission. Now,
Yeah.
I have family members who'll be like, that's because you like rules, but which I do, right? But not from a limiting, because they bound, right? And they give us ways to engage with each other. So one of the things that I think, we assume permission with each other in communication. Am I allowed to ask you 100 questions and not give you the chance to ask me any? Right. And so, hey, listen, I'm more than happy to be like, at the beginning of the conversation with you, Josh, to be like, Andrea, I'm giving you the remote control. Are you good with that? Right. And just that check-in moment of double checking. I
Yes.
watched a colleague of mine, and other people were picking up on the fact that he was talking too much and he wasn't. And I was like, ooh, we did not establish permission in this dialogue with this new prospect of like, what happens if someone is going too long on one of the slides? And that was a reminder to me that I was like, and I go back to like the team formation stages, right? There's forming, storming, norming, and performing. And can we talk about some norms? So I love the remote. I want to give people a remote. I know there's people in my life who would like to have a mute button with me sometimes, I'm sure. They've told me,
Now,
so I know this for a fact.
that's right. Well, I'll tell you, I purposely didn't say the mute because I'm still going to talk. I did not give you a mute button on that remote. Oh, that's funny. Well, good. Well, so let's do this. So, um, I like you. I like certain rules. I like rules, certain rules. When you think of the AEIOU, is there? I like to. I'm kind of an always or never. Unfortunately, that's how my brain works. I kind of think, okay, so is the AEIOU is that an always rule? Is there a different version where you say, well, it's not quite an always, and maybe you've never considered this weird question, but is there ever a place where that doesn't really apply? There's something going on in that conversation where AEIOU isn't appropriate.
As much as I really do love rules and I want to make the world binary,
Yeah.
you know, it can be weird if we're just in a personal conversation to be like, oh, you asked me a question that I can get the sense is more open-ended, but you framed it literally as a yes, no. And then to just say yes and to stop right there. So for me, the A and the E, the answer and explain, can dance together. But I
Hmm.
find for me, the reason I did that for self-coaching and then have used it with other people who are kind of over explainers is to pause and go, are you answering the question asked? Right. To me, that's the real value. So the always is to be reflecting on that with yourself. Am I actually giving Josh the information that he's seeking? And so we miss each other in communication when I don't. Right. And so,
Yes. Can we I would love, with your permission, to kind of live fire practice this. I'd
sure.
like us to do a scenario where we're just having a personal conversation and then we'll level up and do a bit of a more of a business conversation. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So I'll be the I'll ask the questions and you'll answer how you would answer. All right.
Yeah.
So I'll just make up a scenario. So, hey, I heard that you guys were thinking about taking a trip up to San Francisco. Did you guys do that? Cool. Very nice. How was it?
It was nice.
Okay. So now let's pause right there. That was good. So now do it. Now ask me about the San Francisco.
And I'll just notice it was weird, right? Because I was
Yeah.
strictly
Yeah.
AE, like, right. I was
Yeah.
strictly answering and I was like, okay, I'm intentionally going to be that person. So like, you
Okay.
can
Well,
see why in a personal one, I might not,
okay,
but
so
that's all
let's
right.
so I'll ask the question again and maybe do it, in not intentionally awkward. I said, so I heard you guys were going to take a trip up to San Francisco.
We
Did you
did.
guys do that?
We totally did. It was awesome. Yeah. We
Oh,
saw friends.
oh, oh, excellent, very good. And so when did you guys go? Was weather good? Everything good?
It was. We weren't in San Francisco proper and the weather was beautiful. So it was a little hotter than if we were right in the Bay Area.
Okay, and nice.
Yeah. You
Show
know,
me the
have
eye.
you been
Show me
to,
the eye.
have you been to San Francisco? Are you thinking of going? I'm curious why you're curious about our trip.
I'm just nosy. I like hearing where
Okay.
people went. I've been, but just for business, in and out, in and out. I'd like to visit. I don't know what I'd do there though.
Are you a wine drinker by any chance?
I enjoy good wine, absolutely.
Because of course, if you're up in the Bay Area, Napa is just a quick jump comparatively compared to where you're home based, Josh. So that might be something you'd add to your itinerary.
Okay, I see it. I absolutely see it. That's good. I mean, it really does, and I don't think it's nearly as, difficult as us trying to pantomime it a
Yeah.
little bit here, but yeah, that the answer and explain, it's that pause that you take. It's, yeah, we did. It was awesome. And you're kind of the thing you're doing with your voice, you're doing the things to kind of, you know, lead them into, are you going to ask me a follow-up question? Do I need to ask you a question right now? But yeah, because you asked me if I went to San Francisco, I'd probably go on longer than you wanted, for sure. For
You know,
sure.
I had the opportunity recently to coach someone who's super knowledgeable about a tool that we use and
Mhm.
and is new to the team. And I observed that he was really like, I think, showing his work. And one of the things that I observe is when folks are new to a relationship, right? How much explaining do I need to do? How much credentialing myself do I need to do? And I think that's a big piece of why sometimes people put the explain before the answer.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let me ask you this. Are you a technologist at all? Are you a technology curious person?
Tech curious, yes.
Okay. And I know some you and I have some people in common,
Yeah.
and I know one of those people is very, very tech curious and very into AI and
Yep.
Claude and those types of
Yeah.
things. What comes to mind is I would love to write the most amazing prompt on the AEIOU for my Claude and throw my transcript and have it rate me on those things. Is that anything you've played with at all yet?
It's not, but I'm really glad that you brought up the AI piece because if I haven't played with that exactly, but one of the things that I've observed is AI is exceptionally good at answering the question exactly as you asked it, right?
Yes.
And if we actually think about like how the large language models are designed to work, they answer your question as asked, for better or for worse, depending on how good your prompting skills are. And then they explain, right? A-
Yeah. Yeah.
But they don't unless you prompt them. They don't inquire, onboard, or update, right? You actually have to do that as part of good prompting. So even though I've been using AEIOU to like self coach and coach people on my teams to be direct communicators, as I've become a prompt engineer myself in this AI world, I've noticed, okay, I'm interacting with AI in a very similar kind of way. So can we all get better at answering the questions as asked? And when we don't get the answers that we expect, maybe it's feedback on the questions we're asking also.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I will definitely be writing as thorough a prompt as I can to run my meeting transcripts through and just say this is really important to me. Here's the parameters of this model, and just rate me on each one of those things. Look for any questions I asked, or any questions were asked of me rather, and rate me on those things because I think where my mind is going with this is I don't know that when we suffer from that, explaining first, kind of condition that we always are curious about that or even self-recognizing that.
Hmm.
And I don't know, maybe you have some experience. Do you think people kind of know when if somebody's listening to this, do you think, they might actually say, "Oh my gosh, that's me," or is it something we can be pretty obtuse to?
I think the answer is probably yes, and to both of those, because some of us will recognize, oh, we do that. But I'm a political scientist originally by training. That was my academic background. And if you watch political debates, there's like the classic example of the politician answering the question they wanted to be asked, not the one they actually got asked. Right. And I don't want to make this about politics or debates, but that's a really important dynamic. Right. And when we're in relationship, direct relationship with each other in a business setting or in a personal setting, and we're answering the question that we wanted to be asked as opposed to the one that we're actually asked, right? That can create separation. That can make the other person feel unheard, right? How many times have you watched a debate and been like, that's not the question? They haven't answered the question. And what does it do to your feeling about that candidate? So, I'm like, don't be that candidate, Lipton. That's what I say to myself. Sometimes I
That's
still am,
awesome.
but, don't be that
Sure.
girl.
That's right. That's right. Oh, this is so, I don't know. I love this topic because again, spending so much time talking with so many people every week, I can't help but, get probably not self-conscious, but really curious of like, how am I being received? How am I being, perceived? And or is any of this conversation matter? Or am I just,
Yeah.
spewing off and driving people nuts?
Well,
Yeah, go
oh,
ahead, please.
I I worked really closely with a woman named Marilee Adams who wrote a wonderful book called Change Your Questions, Change Your Life. And she has a theory of thinking, and she calls it QDAR, question thinking. And fundamentally, her theory of thinking goes that we're all in a constant question and answer dialogue with ourselves. And so the question that I'm thinking with may not be the question that comes out of my mouth and that I ask you. And so I share this in this moment because often we're talking around issues with each other. And so one of the things when I'm trying to really connect with someone and be received deeply by them in a business or a personal conversation, I'll ask them the question of like, what's the question you're asking yourself? Right. And so put your question on loudspeaker for me. Because have you ever had someone ask you a question and you're like, I'm pretty sure that's not what they're actually trying to understand?
Right, right, right. So so when you sense that, is you ask them to reframe the question even more directly?
Well, usually I'll answer and say, the question I heard was, how's the weather? It's, it's 80 degrees and warm here today. But I think, and this is where the inquire piece comes in, but I sense that you might have been curious about this other thing. Am I on to something there? Right. And so that's where I'll use that kind of follow up inquiry. And often when we talk about like the folks who are like, just tell me your pain. If I
Right.
just go straight there, do you trust me enough to reveal that to you? And are there other things going on? Are there other questions? Like, how often do you encounter this? Like, how many times in your life have you ever gone to your boss and been like, how do you think I'm doing? Do you think I'm a good employee? No, we ask things like, did you like that PowerPoint presentation? Right. But what we're really
Yes.
asking ourselves is, do they approve of me? Do they trust me? Do they want to work with me? Right. So,
Yes.
how do we get there?
That's interesting. That's interesting. It's I learn a lot from meeting folks like yourself, and I reluctantly learn a lot from my partner Jody, who is a hypnotherapist, and
Wow.
she's been at this for about 10 years now, and she just voracious reader and studier of that form, and uh, she didn't come from a therapy background at all. She had, been exposed to hypnosis, and she's like, "This has really helped me with some things." So she decided to become one. And one of the very first things that she kind of experienced with her first few clients was the presenting issue is never the issue. And in a clinical setting, I think, a trained clinician kind of gets that immediately. But, so she would say, somebody comes in and they say, I want to lose 10 pounds. And it's like, okay, why? And getting people to say why they want something is really difficult.
Yes.
That's one angle. And then the other angle is, you talk to a certain client and you're asking them, okay, I'm here because I want to lose weight. What she uncovers is oftentimes very sad and dark and troubling as to why this is
Yeah.
something they suffer. It's like, calories in, calories out, exercise, all the things. It's like, you already know that. So if you already know that, What's the real issue here? What are you
Mhm.
really solving for? And it's fascinating. So, taking it to the level you just did of like, the question is not the question. I need you to put the real question on loudspeaker. I really need to hear
Yeah.
that question clearly.
Yeah.
Because we can dance around, talk around the issue, like you said,
Yep.
forever. And
Yeah.
that person walks around kind of saying like, well, yeah, I guess I feel better, more empowered, smarter, or do I really? You know,
Yeah.
that's
You know,
interesting.
you said a word that I have a really conflicted relationship, which is why.
Mm,
On the one
yes,
hand, I'm a huge fan of Simon Sinek and start with why and the golden circle, and like understanding the why is super valuable. But asking people why questions, one of the things I've observed is why invites a defensive response. And I don't even
it
mean
surely
like I'm
does.
going to be defensive, but why invites me to make the case.
Yes.
And one of the things I've found especially valuable in my business relationships is if I'm asking myself why, the version of the questions I'll often ask is, what had you say that? What
Mm,
has that be a priority for you? And when I
hmm.
reframe why in a series of what and how follow up questions, I often get closer to the person's true why if something matters. Because people are often more willing to describe those elements that then point to that essential issue for them than they are to go straight there. Right. And especially if I'm in
Yes.
the early, coming back to something you said earlier, especially if I'm that early rapport building,
Hmm.
I have a lot more
Hmm.
permission to ask for what's and hows.
That's beautiful. Yeah, when my partner listens to this, she's gonna roast me because how you said the what and how versus the defensive nature of why. She's gonna say, "I've been telling you that forever," and she's not wrong. I really heard it there. It's what and how. So what she would use as an example, because I get stuck in the why a lot because I go through this exercise of just kind of strategic planning. And I really believe we got to start with what do you want?
Hmm.
And then why do you want that? And then why do you want that? And then why do you want that? What she would have encouraged me to do, and I think it's what you would also, frame as is that when the person tells me, I say, what do we want out of this business? They finally come to, I want to sell it for $1 million. If I say, what happens when you
Hmm.
sell it for $1 million? That might be a lot easier for the person to answer, with more purity and
Yeah.
clearness than, "Why do you want that?" Well, gosh, does Josh now think I'm greedy? Does Josh think I'm irresponsible? Does Josh think that's too much, too little? There's so much that can fly into their brain with the why. The what happens then
Yeah.
gets me to the same place, but puts them at a much greater ease. Am I
Yeah.
am I hearing this right? Tell me I'm wrong. It's okay.
Absolutely. Oh, 100%. Because, I don't know about how you were raised and socialized, but, there's still a protective coding, right? I don't walk into the world like, Brene Brown, thank God for the conversation she's brought into the more popular culture around vulnerability. But still, right? I mean, I said earlier the sniff test, right? But especially at work, like, there's a whole conversation from Amy Edmondson about psychological safety, right? And as we're getting to know each other, particularly in this conversation called sales, right? People have so many different conversations and questions they're asking themselves. Can I trust Joshua? If I put all my cards on the table, how often do we hear that in sales? Cards on the table, right? Will that compromise my negotiating position? And so it's so fascinating to me. People are so interesting and we're so messy, right? And I find that both beautiful and exhausting and inspiring and energizing, all of the above.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
I'm like, can I just wield as many tools in my inquiry and my communication toolkit that then allow me? Because if you and I know each other closely, whether it's business or personal, then opening with a why question, there's an intimacy and a trust and a vulnerability that we have. And I call that permission. Um, but we got to build it. Right? We've got to build
That's
it.
right.
Even the most, the person we have in common who introduced us frequently comments on like, oh, Andrea, you kind of walk around with your belly exposed, to use the puppy. Puppies are a lot of
Right.
my metaphors in this land, as you can see. dog mom. And, and
That's
I
right.
do comparatively. And still there are places where I'm like, nope, hands go over the tender bits.
That's
And,
right.
we're all like measuring each other and deciding how truthful can I be? How close to the essential truth of whatever's going on for me.
Yes. Yes.
So,
Oh, fascinating. All right. Let me ask you this. So we're having this conversation. For me, this is a very deep conversation. For you, this seems like this is just what is in your brain, what you get to do every day. What is a day in the life where you get to put this much thought, effort, education into this thing most of us take for granted of just communication?
well, I think I'm super fortunate because I get to live in a question every day of how do I enable people to perform full stop, right? How do I get to enable them to perform? And so I've worked in the talent development, learning and training space for 30 years now. But I was an accidental entrant. Truly, I got a temp job over the summer in 96 while I was like, am I going to finish my PhD in political science, statistics, and game theory? But even before that, because game theory is really modeling what are people's utility curves. And so for decades, I've been sitting inside the question, personally and professionally, of like, what does this person value? What matters to them? How are they factoring it, right? Your utility curve in a game theoretic sense is like, what is your forced ranking of value and how are you going to decide based on that? So, you know, that's the space that I get to live in. And
Yes.
I think it's really an interesting, endlessly fascinating place to live.
And this, I mean this with just peace, love, and respect. I know it's taken me most of my adult career to get to a place where I value like the conversation of communication and, listening and the vulnerability that I think you said Brene Brown, was she the one that did the
Yeah.
vulnerability? That's still new territory for me. I was never dismissive of that field of study and expertise. I lacked probably the maturity or the insight to value it. Obviously you've made a career out of it. Have people valued that, at the level you would
Well,
hope they did?
I will make two, not always. So I'll do my AEIOU and with permission explain why I
Yes.
would say that. I would say one observation I have is that as men and women in this culture, we have different levels of permission to be vulnerable. So, I arrived in a body that got more vulnerability allowance than you did, right? That
I
would be
see.
one of my observations about how gender plays into some of that dance. But for
Mhm.
me, early on in my life, I got my father, who's a computer scientist, gave me this book of logic puzzles. And he said, okay, you can't just come and answer the questions. Interestingly, he wanted me to explain. And so I realize now, as I'm saying this to you, that he actually kind of set up the paradigm at the beginning of my life because he said, come and tell me the answer to the puzzle and then explain how you got it. So by the time I was 7 or 8 years old, I was literally presenting a couple times a week to my father my solutions to logic puzzles. And so it required me to be metacognitive in a way that looking back now was a huge advantage, right? Especially
Yes.
in this weird AI world we find ourselves in now, thinking about how I think, how the AI responds to the way I construct my thinking is something that I quickly got good at because I went, oh, Malcolm Gladwell talks about your 10,000 hours. So
Yes.
I've already got thousands of hours of practicing thinking about
Yes.
my thinking and thinking about other
Yes.
people's thinking. So,
Yes. Well, that I love that, and when it comes to just the career based on this topic of communication and how we think, where have you landed in the world? We were at Harvard Publishing for a while. Where else have we landed along the way of people, needing, requesting, being open to this type of work?
well, fundamentally, wherever there's learning going on and intentional learning. So I practice learning as a business, right, in corporate. So I started at JP Morgan at the beginning of my career as what I jokingly call the accidental trainer. And I now work for a consulting organization where we're really focused on ERP training. And you might go, how is like the soft skill communication helping people use systems like SAP and Oracle and other systems like that? But fundamentally, we've got to be asking ourselves the question, when someone comes to this workflow, how are they actually going to approach it? What are the questions they're asking themselves? Can we proactively answer those questions for them so that they can use it and perform effectively? And when I think about the world that you dance in and, supporting help desk technicians, right? There's the ticket and like, what's the question the person's asking? What are they struggling with? How are they feeling about it? Right? For us to really be effective in serving our customers in that domain, some of the best customer service people I've worked with are ones who are really dialed in to what's the question I'm being asked? What's the question the person really is asking? Right? Am I able to answer both?
Right. Yeah, that's huge. And never want to be critical of sets of people. But I would say it's probably not too off to say, early career technicians do struggle in ways that they don't always immediately recognize. Of like, am I short with the person? Do I think my client is stupid because I've reset their password 3 times? And they don't always do the best job of hiding that from the person they're talking to. And as they mature, there's always it just kind of certain folks come through that. And that as a technician, they become the best salesperson. They become the person that every client wants to work with. And I always kind of think, is that just organic to who they are, or did they learn enough along the way to say, this style of communication is really working well, I'm just going to double down and do more of it? I don't know. I still don't have an answer. But what I do know is many an IT company has suffered because that really good engineer is just terrible with the clients or terrible to work with in the office. And it's like, where's the opportunity? What opportunity have we given that person to be trained on this, as you called it, soft
Yeah.
skill, to just learn? And I
Yeah.
just think in really small business, that's a gap that's, I think, continues to be hard to fill, that getting
And
that training to folks.
one of the things that I find really fascinating, especially, and I find this especially true of people who are really technically skilled in whatever their domain of practice is, whether it's technology or science or even communication, is when people are unconsciously competent, right? And in the learning profession, we talk about, you know, first you don't know, and then you don't know, and then you start to learn and integrate, and then you don't know that you know, and then at the end, you come to this place where, I was actually kind of having a debate recently with a manager who was like, "Oh, well, it's just intuitive," and I said, "You have what I call informed intuition." Because you've got 20 years of this. You're unconsciously competent and you have forgotten that you are. And so, those early career technicians who are super passionate about the technology forget that they've developed competence that their clients and customers may not have. And so, answer the question as it's asked, even if you think it's a stupid question. And I know we're not allowed to say that word anymore, but I mean, we've all thought that. I think it sometimes, and I'm like, really? They're asking that? But answer it, Andrea. That's the question they think they need answered right now. And then maybe I can inquire and say, "Hey, would you also like to know how to not need me to reset your password once a week? I've got some
Yes.
tips for you."
There you go.
And then
Yes, yes,
onboard
yes.
whether or not they'd like that information and update your answer accordingly.
I love it. I love it. I'm telling you, AEIOU is bulletproof, Andrea. It is bulletproof. I love it. I think well, it'll be the challenge for the production team to figure out how to title this video. Ideally, but I hope it says AEIOU right on the front of it. I love that, Andrea. Thank you for sharing that with us all today.
My pleasure, Josh. Thanks so much for the invitation and for the conversation.
Of course. Now, we're going to keep recording for a moment. And
Okay.
again, I'm so curious. And if you're still listening, please keep continuing listening. If you like GTO, because I'm going to talk poker and GTO with Andrea for a minute. All right. So I play poker, Andrea. I love the
Okay.
game of poker. And I don't know, have you played poker? Are you aware of poker
I'm
beyond just kind of the
aware of
basics?
poker. I actually knew somebody who was like in the world championship of poker.
Yes. Okay. So that's a good context. About 12 years ago, I really started playing serious. And at that time, the concept of playing poker GTO, game theory optimized, was really coming on board. And you had this division of people that played the table, played the player, and the people that are playing GTO. And the GTO kids were just crushing the game. Then what we saw like 2 or 3 years ago, and my poker experts can comment and tell me where I'm getting my timing right, but once the game they now say the game of No Limit Hold'em is solved.
Hmm.
So because everyone's GTO'd it to death, all these tables, everything, they just make the perfect play and they're willing to lose 49% of the time, but the large enough sample set, you win on the decisions. Just it fascinates me. I'm not serious enough to have mastered GTO by a long shot, but as the game got solved, it's now returned back to playing the player,
Yeah.
using your intuition because we all know we're playing from the same playbook, but you still have a tell. You still have a pattern that you can't beat. So the GTO robot kids, they're now getting a little more exposed, but boy, for a decade, they were just printing money. Can you study GTO, this or GT? Tell me where what you did applies to what I just talked about.
Well, when I started out in the space of game theory in the early 90s, the late 80s, early 90s, as a teenager and then a college student and grad student, it was during the day when the social scientists were trying to take over game theory, right? And there wouldn't be GTO in poker without the social scientists having an influence because the economists started it, right? And they're the ones who are like, everything is a financial utility. And the social scientists said, well, wait a minute, there are other things that function in people's utility curves, right? So as I was listening to you without being super up on poker game theory optimization, I was like, oh, at some point the like technical is going to break down and the humanness of players is going to come back in, isn't it? Right? As people are able to solve for the cards in the
Yes.
game and have that piece. But I'll tell you, if you've never heard of this guy, check him out. His name is Sibelius, spelled Tseb, Tsebelis. George Sibelius.
Okay.
He wrote a brilliant book called Nested Games.
Nested games?
Nested Games. And that
Yeah.
broke my head open when I read it, Josh,
Yeah.
because he said something, and I'm probably gonna, paraphrase it badly, but he said, if you ever see someone engaged in a move that doesn't make sense, you're not perceiving all the games that they're making that move in. So you can optimize for the cards in poker because that's the game, right?
Yes.
But then
Yes.
people are also factoring in, where am I in the competition? Who am I playing? If I
Yes.
beat this person before.
Yes.
So when I witness somebody at work or my personal life and I think that doesn't make any sense, I immediately go, what games are they playing in addition that this is a
Yes.
move, that this moment is a move in?
Yes. Yes.
So
Yes. Yeah, that will break my brain as I think more about it. The thing similar to that broke my brain when I started taking poker serious is the first, most people play the game of poker of what do I have? I've got aces. And that's the end of the game. They'll play 20 years like that. The next layer of is what do I have and what do I think my opponent has?
mhm,
Now you were taking the game serious, but that goes to about 4 degrees higher at the best of the best. So what do I think you think, I think you think, I think I have? And some people call BS on that, but when you watch the same players end up at the top of the player rankings every
yeah,
year, you can't deny that they have a nested game going on where they're applying so many factors of logic. It's like,
yeah,
and what's so beautiful about poker, like chess is a game of perfect information. We both know everything on the table.
yeah,
Poker's a game of imperfect information. So everyone's going to be playing these nested games and
yeah,
turns out that there's enough patterns. But tell me how
yeah.
that, I mean, how does that land with you?
Well, it's both imperfect information and chance, right? Because when you
Yeah.
draw a game tree, there's perfect information. I know everything that you know, right? The chessboard, it's all there and we can see it, right?
Yes.
If nobody shuffled the cards, then it would be imperfect information. But there's also chance, like how did the cards get shuffled? And
Yes.
so I find it fascinating because I'm like, is this imperfect information where I just don't know what you know? Or are there these, wild cards, literally or figuratively, in the situation? And, can I start to understand what kind of game I'm dealing with? Um,
Yes.
and I never considered myself a salesperson, but about 7 years ago, when I was now working in a sales partnership kind of role and started to have a really high close rate, a
Mhm.
bizarrely high, like statistically out of the alignment with my peers kind of close rate, folks are like, what's going on? And I was like, I'm literally drawing game trees. Literally. I was back to drawing out, this is what I know, here's chance, how do I remove
Yeah.
variability, and trying to think about it in that way. So, yeah,
Wow. Is that something you did that for yourself in explaining to your colleagues what you're doing different than they might be doing? Is that something you've ever been able to see replicated with have you ever, been able to walk someone else how to do similar?
absolutely. Because there were already all these tools that people in sales use, like a relationship map, right? The change management people call it a stakeholder assessment. Right. And so it's like using all of these pieces. All I was really trying to do was construct someone's utility curve. Fundamentally, I was like, okay, let me take the lessons from game theory and be like, what's Josh's utility function? And right. And okay, what do they know? What do I not know? What matters to them? Right. Can I start to see all those different pieces? And I'm curious, as you've gotten serious about poker, how has that impacted you as a salesperson?
I'll tell you, thanks for asking that because it has had a tremendous impact, and and then also now I've kind of moved on to chess for the last few years and just trying to understand that game at a much higher level. Both of them just start to teach. I think anyone's hobby they can relate it to
Yeah.
this. My hobby happens to be a perfect reflection of life. So poker very much does something similar to your brain where I need to think about it. It was really kind of an odds thing and a math thing and a sunk cost fallacy thing where
Yeah.
it's like how can I use the decisions that others make at the poker table and use that to kind of think about what my prospect is doing at the same
Mhm.
time.
Yeah.
And so I don't think I've thought about it as clearly as you did with your tree, but it's hey, there's a reason that person said that. What were they really signaling? How are they answering that question relative to how they answered the question I asked them 2 minutes ago that was a much safer feeling question to them?
Yeah.
What was the delta there? Are they feeling more or less comfortable? So, a lot of, spending, hundreds, if not thousands of hours at a poker table, you have no option other than to just watch people and hear them and what did they say, what didn't they say, and tie that to where their heads might be.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Well,
definitely.
funny story, and particularly the pattern in your wall behind you. When I was a
Mm,
grad student and I was taking the advanced game theory, there was a weekend I was at Columbia in New York City and it was really snowy. And basically it was like nobody was going anywhere and the subways were shut down. And so I
yes.
decided I was going to solve chess. Because I knew it's a game of
Really?
information. It's a game of complete information. It is a solvable
Yes.
game. It is tic tac toe with more squares, right? And
Yes,
I know there's
yes.
like a chess master who hates my guts for saying that somewhere out there, feeling the
Yes,
disturbance in the universe. I got
yes.
I got 1.5 moves in. A friend of mine trudged over in the snow, opened the door to my apartment, and I had paper up the wall. I had covered half my apartment. It was a small New York City graduate school apartment,
Why?
but I
Yes,
looked like
yes.
somebody at the CSI or Law and Order where they go find
Yes,
the like insane, like the person who's really gone off their center. Cause
yes.
it was, yeah, it was a scene, but it was a really important moment for me because as I look back to that, I was like, okay, first, life is complicated and people are complicated. And this game is full information and it is solvable. And now we're seeing that with supercomputers being able to actually beat the best grandmasters because they can run through all the scenarios so fast. But
Yes,
it really
yes.
taught me focus on what are the most likely scenarios, right? And this is why for years in chess, the grandmasters could beat the computers even as they got faster, was because they knew different kinds of moves and what was going to come next and they could run more quickly. And, what are the really critical decision nodes? And that's the thing that I keep taking back. And when I bring it back to sales and when I bring it back to business decision making, do I understand which are the most likely branches that we're going to follow and where
Mm,
those critical decision nodes are? And if I can see where those are, then that increases my probability. And it also allows me to get ahead of where those obstacles are likely to be. In sales, we talk about like removing objections. If you can't see far
yes,
enough down the decision nodes, you won't know where the likely objections live.
that's right. Okay, so all right, so I have to say this. So you asked me how studying and playing poker affected my maybe how I viewed sales,
Yeah.
and we had just wrapped up or we had just been in the middle of a GTO type conversation, but now I reflect on my answer, I went straight to the behavioral. I somehow have not yet tied that GTO, the tree that you had built. That was not my answer to you. So now I'm so curious about thinking about how can I take those decision nodes? How can I be a little more game theory analytical about how I sell and what happens in the predictive nature of the patterns? Do you find, or so just kind of asking a question on that, when you would think about your deals and your close ratio, would it be a very discrete moment in time that you would say, I've now met with this person. I am now going to my whiteboard and I'm going to start drawing that tree? Was it something you just do on the fly and it's just kind of helping decision making in the moment? What did that actually look like?
Because I had so much practice starting with literally at age 7, my dad gave me a book called What is the Name of This Book? And it's a logic puzzle book. And it's all about the island and the knights and the knaves. The knights only tell the truth. The knaves only lie. There's A, B, C, D, and E. 3 of them are this, 2 of them are that. They said these things, who's which, right? So I've been doing game trees, like if this, then this. Nope, that's the wrong answer. Come back down the tree for decades. So more often than not, it was really fast happening in my mind. But there were
Okay.
definitely times when things got complex, like when there was really large complexity. And then I'll pull out a pen and literally be like, okay, here are the different stakeholders. Because when you've got multiple stakeholders, just like when you're sitting around playing poker, right?
Yeah.
You all are playing the same game, but you have different utility functions, different information, right? And so now you've got this multi-dimensional game tree that you need to grapple with. So I definitely draw things and I'm like, okay, here are the steps. And like, how does this person engage with these steps? Which one is optimized for Joe versus Sally versus, Manuel or whoever the players
Yes.
are. But,
Yes.
it's interesting that you said the behavioral, because I would invite you to consider that game theory optimizing has a behavior from a nested games perspective, has a
Hmm.
behavioral component. Right. And a kind of a
Yes.
radical statement to some people, everybody's always optimizing for being right about what they think, full stop. Right. So, like, we see people sabotage themselves, right, or do things we think that are not in their best interest. But from a game theoretic standpoint, it's like, well, they're winning the game of being right, even if what they're being right about is, I can't win. I'm always right. I mean, we've all done, like, I think most humans have
Yes.
some version of like, I just can't win with this person, or, oh, I'll never be
Yes.
lucky, or whatever that, cognitive
Yep.
biases. And when we talk about cognitive biases and things like that, right, we're
Yes.
revealing this is such game theory nerdery, right? We're revealing our utility function and
You
which
know,
moves we don't even see are available to us.
there's a saying in poker that if you can't spot the fish at the table within the first 1 minute, you are the fish. Meaning you're so, and
Yep.
that's where that gets so true is the guy who sits down and he's playing a few hands and he starts saying things like, Oh, I got terrible luck. The cards are treating me bad. It's like, cool, you just told us you're the fish. If you're playing the game from that cognitive bias of I can't win, it's like, cool, that you've just told the table you aren't thinking about poker at the level. And there's another phrase that says, don't tap the tank. So everyone at that table knows when a guy reveals that, just nod your head and say, oh man, that sucks. I know the cards are unlucky. We're just clocking the information and we're not going to debate that with you. We're going to say, yeah, you're right, man. You are having bad luck. We're going to reinforce his belief that it's all about luck. It's all about the night's not good to you. So
Yeah.
and I'll tell you, I asked the question about, is that something that you would do on the fly, or is that something you would actually go back and take a moment with each transaction or each opportunity? It just reminds me again, that I had a coach, Danny Noseworthy, my poker coach, and he would say, "Go play 1,000 hands online." We record every hand when we're playing online, and just bring me 4 or 5 hands that you found interesting. And we'd get on our call, and I thought, "Okay, cool, I got 5. That's what we're gonna do." We couldn't get through 1 hand
Mhm.
in an hour. Every single micro decision. What were you thinking there? What did you think he was gonna do? And I'd say, "Danny, do you do this? Is this what you do? You spend some time every week going over a bunch of hands?" And he's like, I can't explain it, but no. I've already ran this as I was in the hand. I know you are new. You don't even know what question to ask yourself yet. So I feel like with that game tree and the sales,
Yeah.
this is very similar.
Yep.
I have to be very
Yeah.
intentional in the beginning to dissect where
Yeah.
I'm at and where I've been,
Yeah.
and then apply it to get better at applying them.
Right. And that's exactly what Malcolm Gladwell was talking about when he talked about outliers, right? And the 10,000 hours to achieve mastery. And so you're talking to a coach who's clocked well over his 10,000 hours. And so, I realized in business that because I've been practicing this, if this, then this, nope, wrong answer. If this, then this, nope, wrong answer. In logic puzzles where there was a right or wrong answer, those were games of full information. But I started training myself. I'm 54 now. I started training at age 7. And so, right. So by the time I got to grad school and I was officially studying game theory, it was so second nature to me that people were like, oh, she's a prodigy at the game trees. I could draw them really quickly for people. And, and I had the aha moment and I like trotted out this book. And my grad professor was like, well, yeah, that's a seminal like logic puzzle book. When did you
Ah.
encounter it? And I was like, it was a gift that I got when I was like 7 or 8 years old. And he's like, that's weird. And I thought, well, my family was a little bit weird. My dad is this genius professor at Princeton. So, I try to have grace for myself when I'm in my 10,000 hour building in a new discipline or new domain.
Yes.
And you can describe it a lot of ways. The learning folks, we like to talk about the getting to the place of unconscious competence.
Yes.
And but there are times where I'm like, nope, I got to slow my roll, draw it out, draw it
That's
out,
right.
Andrea.
That's right. Well, I'll tell you, I appreciate this whole conversation, especially this last 10 minutes. I never thought about game theory, sales being solvable, thinking about it in that logical way. I thought of it just like a fish plays poker. It's just all intuition, I'm just going to do these motions. I'm going to go through this routine, and it works enough times that I don't need to challenge myself on it. I suspect I'll be looking at sales very differently over the next few months in particular. So thank you for
Well,
that.
if I left you with one question, and that's my favorite question to ask in sales is, what is this person's utility curve?
Okay. Okay. That's the question to answer.
Yeah. And let them be human. Don't just put
Yes.
them in their job, put them in their full body.
That's right. That's right. I love it. Well, Andrea, thank you so much for coming on.
My
And
pleasure.
where can people find you if they want to find you out in the world? Where can they find you?
The best way to find me is on LinkedIn.
Okay.
So yeah, Andrea Lipton. I'm AF Lipton on the LinkedIn space, and you'll see me with my crazy glasses. So
Uh,
yeah,
perfect.
that's the best entry
Perfect.
point. So thank
Awesome.
you
Well,
so
thank
much,
you.
Josh.
You bet. And thank you. And thanks for sticking on, especially if you made it through this last 15 minutes as well. Hope you enjoyed it all.
Game
Bye.
theory, so much fun. Talk to you
Yes,
later.
it is.
Have a
Bye.
good one.